My mother-in-law booked our wedding venue under her own name, put down her own deposit without telling us, and then acted wounded when the coordinator kept calling her instead of me, 3 months before I had already signed a contract for a different place. Theo and I got engaged in April, in his kitchen, with a ring his grandmother had left him and a Tuesday night lasagna neither of us finished because we kept stopping to look at the ring instead of eating. It felt, for about 11 days, like the cleanest, happiest thing that had ever happened to either of us. On day 12 his mother Vivian called to say she'd already found the venue, a restored barn 40 minutes outside the city with string lights and a name that sounded like a candle scent, and that she'd put a deposit down that morning so nobody else could grab the date. I hadn't seen a single photo of it. I hadn't said a word about barns. I told her, gently, that we'd actually been looking at a place downtown, an old library building with tall windows, and that we'd need to think about the barn. Vivian said of course, no pressure at all, she just hated the idea of us losing the date. 2 weeks later the library building's event coordinator called to ask whether we still wanted our hold because someone claiming to be the mother of the groom, handling logistics, had called to cancel it. I hadn't authorized anyone to handle anything. Theo called his mother, and she said she must have misunderstood which venue was ours, so sorry, she'd sort it out. She did not sort it out. I rebooked the library myself, paid the new deposit myself, and told her directly this time, we've chosen the venue. It's decided, thank you for wanting to help. By June she had a seating chart drafted for a venue we weren't using, a caterer she liked better than ours on standby, and a guest list with 40 names on it that I didn't recognize. When I asked who they were, she said old family friends, they'll be so hurt if they're not invited, and when I asked whether we could maybe cap the guest list at the number we'd budgeted for, she told me weddings are a family event, not a private party, and family doesn't count guests like that. I counted the invoices. Family absolutely counts guests like that. The dress was the first thing that felt less like overstepping and more like a decision to just take something from me. I'd found it in July, a simple ivory dress with a low back, nothing dramatic, exactly what I wanted. I put down a deposit at the boutique and scheduled my final fitting for late August. When I showed up for that fitting, the seamstress told me my mother-in-law had come in the week before with notes, and had asked whether the neckline could be raised and the back closed up a bit more, to be tasteful, and had left a card to be called when the alterations were done, so she could see it first. Nobody had called me to ask if that was fine. It was not fine. I had the seamstress undo every change and I asked, calmly, how Vivian had known which boutique to go to at all, since I'd never told her. The seamstress checked her file. The appointment had been booked under my name, by phone, using my number, which Vivian did not have unless she'd gotten it from Theo's phone while visiting. That was the point where I stopped being annoyed and started being careful. Not dramatic, careful. I made a folder on my laptop, unglamorously named wedding, and started forwarding things into it. The venue cancellation call log the coordinator had emailed me, a screenshot of the guest list Vivian had sent Theo without CCing me, the boutique's note about who'd booked the thing and how, a text from the caterer asking to confirm the change of final headcount from Vivian, which I had never approved. I didn't tell Theo I was keeping a folder. I told him what was happening as it happened, which he already half knew, because his mother had been doing versions of this to him his whole life and he'd just never had a reason to add it up before either. What surprised me most wasn't any single incident, it was how reasonable each one sounded on its own. A deposit here, a phone call there, a well-meant note to a seamstress. Any one of them, told alone at a dinner party, sounds like a mother who cares too much. It was only in the folder, lined up by date, that the shape of it became obvious. Not a woman who loved her son and got overeager, but a woman who had never once, in 5 months, asked either of us what we actually wanted before acting on our behalf. I started noticing the pattern in old photos too. Theo as a kid in outfits that weren't his style, a childhood bedroom painted a color he told me he'd hated. This wasn't new. It had just never had a wedding-sized stage before. In September she rewrote the seating chart again, this time for the correct venue, and sat herself at the head table in the chair we'd reserved for my grandmother, who had flown in from another state and who Vivian had met exactly twice. When I moved the place cards back, Vivian told the wedding planner, not me, that there had clearly been a mix-up and that she'd like to be reseated closer to the family since I am the groom's mother, as though my grandmother wasn't also, at that table, somebody's mother. The planner, to her enormous credit, forwarded me the email instead of just fixing it quietly, which is how it ended up in the folder too. The vows were the last straw before the wedding itself. Theo had written his weeks in advance and read me a draft one night on the couch, half of it about how I'd shown up for him during a bad year at his old job, unglamorous, unphotogenic support that nobody throws a toast for. 2 days before the wedding he mentioned, almost as an aside, that his mother had asked to help him polish his vows, and had sent back a version with my name removed from the parts about that bad year and replaced with vaguer language about the people who supported me, alongside a full paragraph, unprompted, about how much he owed his mother for raising him right. Theo hadn't used her version. He told me about it not because he thought it mattered, but because it had genuinely upset him, the idea that she'd try to edit her own son's marriage into a tribute to herself. I asked him, carefully, whether he thought his mother would try something at the wedding itself, given the pattern of the last 5 months. He said probably, and that if she did, he wanted me to just say the word and he'd handle it in front of everyone, no hesitation, because he was done being the reason she thought this was allowed. I told him I already had a plan, and it didn't need him to blow anything up. It just needed one toast at the right moment and the folder. The morning of the wedding, Vivian told the photographer, unprompted, that she wanted a formal portrait taken of herself alone in front of the venue sign for the announcement and asked him to prioritize it before the ceremony, framing it as what the mother of the groom always gets, it's tradition. The photographer, who I had briefed the week before with an actual shot list Theo and I had built together, quietly told her he'd add it to his list and then texted me the request, verbatim, because I'd asked him to flag anything unusual. It went into the folder. By the time I put my dress on, the folder had 11 items in it and I hadn't added a single thing that wasn't real, dated, and sent by someone other than me. The ceremony itself was, against every odd Vivian had tried to generate, completely fine. She sat where she was assigned. She cried at the right parts, the way most mothers do, and for a few minutes I let myself believe the day might just be a wedding and nothing else. Then came the reception, and the toasts, and Vivian standing up before the best man had even finished setting his glass down, tapping her fork against it with the specific confidence of someone who has never once been told no and meant it. She thanked everyone who made today possible, which in context meant her. She said she'd handled so much of the planning behind the scenes, as mothers do, and that she hoped the barn venue, the one we never used, photographed as beautifully in everyone's memory as it had in her head. A few guests laughed, unsure if it was a joke. It wasn't. She said she'd chosen the flowers, which she hadn't, and that she'd found the dress, which she absolutely had not. She had tried to change it without permission. She raised her glass to a wedding she was proud to have built, and looked, briefly, directly at me, like she was waiting to see if I'd correct her in front of 120 people and lose. I stood up before she'd fully sat back down, which nobody expected, including Theo, though he'd been told there would be a moment and to just let it happen. I thanked her, first, sincerely, for coming, and for loving her son enough to want this day to be perfect for him. Then I said that since she'd mentioned everything she'd handled behind the scenes, I wanted to actually show everyone what had been handled, because a wedding this size runs on paperwork, and paperwork doesn't lie the way toasts sometimes do. I had the planner cue the slideshow screen, the one meant for the photo montage later, and instead put up, for about 90 seconds, 4 things: the venue cancellation call log with Vivian's name on it, the caterer's headcount change request she'd submitted without us, the boutique's alteration note, and the photographer's text about the solo portrait for the announcement. No commentary. No raised voice. Just dates, names, and a single line under each one. What we'd actually decided instead. The room went the specific kind of quiet that isn't awkward so much as it is everyone doing math at once. My grandmother, from the correct seat this time, said well, in a tone that did a great deal of work. Vivian's face did something complicated and then settled into a smile clearly built for the cameras still pointed at her. She said, lightly, that she only ever wanted to help. I said I knew, and that was exactly why I'd married her son and not her, and that from tonight on, help meant asking first. Theo stood up next to me, took the microphone for exactly one sentence, and said that everything on that screen was true, that he loved his mother, and that he was done pretending 3 months of it hadn't happened just to keep a dinner comfortable. Then he asked the DJ to start the music because it was, after all, still a wedding. Vivian left before the cake was cut. She texted Theo the next morning to say she felt ambushed and humiliated in front of people who matter to this family, which is a sentence that says a great deal about who she thinks matters. Theo wrote back one line, that he'd felt exactly that way for 5 months and had simply never had a slideshow, and that he loved her and hoped she'd think about why one was necessary. It's been 3 weeks since the wedding. Vivian has not apologized, but she has also not called the caterer, the photographer, or anyone else's phone number pretending to be me. She asked, through Theo, whether she could come to Sunday dinner next month, and he said yes, on the condition that any opinion about our house, our future kids, or our next family event gets emailed to both of us first, in writing, like everything else now does. She hasn't emailed anything yet. I still have the folder. I haven't needed to add to it, but I've noticed I don't feel the old flinch anymore when her name shows up on a screen, because now, if she tries it again, I already know exactly where the evidence goes.